Welcome to How to Become a Production SQL Database Administrator. My name is Raphael. In this video now, we're going to actually look at transactional replication and how to set it up. In the previous video, I went over the academics of what replication was and specifically transactional replication. So now let's continue and actually implement transactional replication. So go to your environment here. And under Home, make sure that, as usual, make sure the DC is on and powered on. Make sure the server 1 and server 2 are powered on. And go to server 1. And I'll be providing you with this entire script so you can just follow, if you will, at this point. A couple of things I want you to notice on server 1. I don't have a database called foods, which we're going to create, and I'll provide you with the logins or the script. And the other thing I want you to do is, you'll notice here we have a login called SQL rep. And that needs to be created in the domain environment and then created in each individual SQL login. So if you go to server 2, you'll see that I have SQL rep created as a login. And obviously we need to create a domain user for SQL rep first. So on your DC, click on the Active Directory and then click on Users, right click, go New, Users, and then fill in the name REP, and then fill in that the rest of the detail. We've already done that, as you can see. So I've already created a domain user called rep. Once you've created the domain user called rep, then I want you to go to the individual server on server 1. I want you to create a login for that Windows user. And the way we create is right-click, new login, search. Make sure you're connected to the server or the entire enterprise rather than the specific server, and go type in rep, check names, okay, and then obviously I've already created one, and make sure you map it to sysadmin. It's going to say I've already created one because I already have, but that's what you're going to do for both servers. So now that we've done that, we're great. So let's start with replication. So one thing I want you to note now is, before we do that, obviously, is I'm going to provide you with this script for creating a database called foods. So all I want you to do actually is highlight this from the select statement, and I'm going to create a food. So I'm just going to execute this. Let's click it again. Sometimes it takes a second for the connectivity. So I may have lost connectivity here. So let's make sure I've connected in. I'm not sure why, but we'll see. Well, let me disconnect that. Actually, let me do this. Copy this. You may not have to do this, so I think I'm having a connectivity issue here. So I'm going to go New, make sure I'm connected to the appropriate server, server 1. I'm going to paste it. And let's create a database. And let's fresh it. And there's the database. Now, using that database, I'm going to create this table, which I'll provide you, called fruits. And I'm going to insert data, 5 records, as you can see. So there we have 5 records for this database and this table right here, fruits. Now, the other thing I want you to do is use the same database, and I want you to create a table called vegetables, then insert this. So I'm just going to select this actually and go execute. And here you'll see that I have 4. A couple of things I want you to know, because this is an important, very important aspect of transactional replication. And that is, anytime you publish an article, that article or that table must have a primary key as part of the table created. If it doesn't, then you will not be able to do transactional replication. And if you'll notice here that this table that I created, fruit, I have a column called fruits ID with the primary key set up. So this primary key created for fruits. However, you'll notice on the tables, I do not have a primary key created. And that's going to be important, because this will, even though we have an existing table in this database, it will not be able to be we will not be able to do transactional replication as one of the prerequisites for transactional replication is that each table have a primary key. And that's why I created these tables, one with the primary key, one without. And when we actually do it, you'll actually see that. So just take a note of that. That's very important, that any tables that you're setting up for replications must have primary keys, and that's why I'm emphasizing it. So now that we have two tables here, if I refresh it, we have two tables. So let's start our replication. So the first thing you want to do, obviously, if I go to server 2, and I've already created this, we've already talked about it. And if I just collapse and look at this, now we don't have a database called foods. So let's start transactional replication. So the way to do the transactional replication is you'll see a folder called replication. If you click on the plus sign, you'll see two folders, local publication, local subscription. And if I refresh that, I do not have any publication. So the first thing I want to do actually is set up replication by setting up what's called a distributor. And the way you do that is you right-click replication folder and go configure distribution. This must be enabled before we can do the replication. Now let's go over this slowly one by one, because in the next couple of videos I'll be going over faster. So configure distribution wizard. So this wizard can do one of the following. It can configure your database, configure your server to be a distributor. It can configure your server to be a publisher and act as its own domain, as its own distributor. Or you can configure your server publisher and use another distributor. In a larger environment, you would have separate servers. You would have a separate server for the publisher and a separate server for the distributor. However, for our purposes, we're going to use this server, server 1, both acting as a publisher and a distributor. But this decision obviously is based on how much work you're going to be doing, how much workload you're going to be doing. In very busy environments, obviously, you may want to set this distributor on its own physical server. But for our purposes, we're going to actually combine it here. So go next. Obviously, now, as I said, it's going to ask where do you want to configure the distributor, and we're going to leave it in SQL Server. If I wanted to create a distributor on a separate physical server, then I would click this and add this and select the appropriate server. But for our purposes, we're good. So again, larger environments, you will do that. Go next. Snapshot folder. Specify the root location where the snapshot will be stored. Remember what I told you what a snapshot was. It's basically a copy of the publications about to be set for publication. Obviously, by default, it's setting it to do. But however, understand this. To allow distribution and merge agents to run at subscribers and access the snapshot of the publications, you must use a network path. So this is going directly to the local snapshot folder. But since we're in a domain and I want the other server 2 to access this data, I must create a network path. And that is created here. So if you'll notice this, let me create this. I created this. Now, this on this local drive, I created a folder called replication. And if I go right-click properties and sharing, you'll see that it's a network path, which I've shared. And we've gone over how to create a shared folder. So make sure you create a folder and make sure it's a network path and shared. And then give appropriate permissions, not only for this server, but make sure you have appropriate permissions for server 2. And I've already shown you that also. You can see that I've got rep. And obviously make sure that's important also, since I'm here. Make sure that the login for both on both servers, the rep has access to this, because that's going to be running the replication agents. So make sure you have that security and rep is accessing this folder. So make sure that's important, just to mention that. So now that we've set it up, that's where it's going to go. So I'm going to change the path to that and go next. And obviously it's going to ask for the distribution database, and you can call it whatever you want. We'll just leave it here as we want. We can change this also for distribution server. Distribution stores changes to transactional publication until subscriber can update it. And the path must refer to the disks that are local to the distributor. So these are fine. This doesn't have to be network. Map networks are invalid. So make sure you understand that. So do not change these. These are specific to specific server. So go next. Now it's asking for the publisher. Obviously, the publisher is server 1, and the database has its own database, as we mentioned. So go next. Wizard actions, obviously, you can configure the distribution right now, and you can generate a script. I generally click on that so we can generate the entire process. But I'll be showing you how to actually replicate using the script later. So go next. Obviously, this is a summary, so we just want to make sure what we're doing and everything looks okay. So go finish. Excuse me. So now it's going to obviously configure the distributor, which we need to do, and then enable the publisher, which is server 1, which is this. Obviously, as you can see, it's successful. So we'll close, and we're good. So now that we've set up the replication, we still have to there's no publications to push. So that's what we're going to do next. So the next thing we're going to do is decide on what publication to push to the subscriber. This is the subscriber. And so we can go right-click publication, new publication, and now this wizard pops up and it's asking what to publish. So go next. Obviously, it's going to allow you to select the various databases that you have in your publisher. Ours, obviously, is foods, so we're going to go select that and go next. Now, these are the types of publications types that I was talking about. And obviously, the one we're going to be demonstrating here is transactional replication. So click on transactional publication and go next.